this is for the people out there. So that's an excellent drill for organizing the center of mass of the club and the face angle, right? The pitch of the shaft and the face angle. It's an excellent drill. And that's very important. And we do now understand, or at least starting to understand, the importance of transition. Sasho talks about P5 all the time. Well, you got to have a great transition to have a great P5. So that's the Alamo, man. You don't have time after that. It's done. It's over. It's predetermined. I don't care what you felt through impact. It's over, right? I don't care what kind of athlete you think you are. It's under human reaction time. So anyways, it's an excellent drill for determining the center of mass and the face angle. And that's very important. But from a ground force reaction standpoint, if the world struggles to get enough vertical pressure under the lead side soon enough, which is what all the high-speed club head speed players are doing, the problem with that drill is it makes the average amount of vertical pressure the maximum at the top of the backswing. And I just told you all the tour players I've ever measured don't do it. So once they've got this organized, once they got it, get them out of it so they can start. Otherwise, what you've done is you've probably helped them short term, but you've limited their potential long term for club head speed generation.
Well, and here's the thing, look, if you're looking at P4 at the top, they've already gone forward. You know what I mean? They're already going forward. And you tell me if I'm wrong here, but to me, as a feel, I almost think sometimes when they've got halfway back, a lot of their pressure's done. Because that's that's the position where the club head is at its widest. So you would imagine then the centre of gravity the furthest across to the right. Then as they start moving, now they're going the other way. So if we're talking about stopping here, right, and you look at the traces that you've been privy to, Bryson, DJ, right, Tiger, right, they're already over here.
Right.
You know,
if you want to, and so interesting. Here's my shameless plug. Soon, we're going to start. My teaching partner and I, Jeremy, we're going to start releasing a video or a content, I should say, of we've got 3 Remax long drive guys, 2 of which were finalists, and we've hooked them up to every single bit of technology we can get our hands on, and it was great because I didn't tell them shit. I told them, I go, I'm not here to help you. I certainly don't want you hitting a wedge because I think I'm better at it than you. I want you to hit the living tar out of the golf. I want you to bash the trash out of it. And I'm just here to find out, again, for that type of swing, what are the commonalities? There has to be some. And because what I am finding in the States, and I said this at the last time I was in London, is that I jokingly said, no one's looking at Jordan Spieth's 3D. And that kid's going to be in the Hall of Fame. More teachers in the States are looking at Jamie Sadlowski's 3D and ground force reaction than they are Jordan Spieth. So what's that tell you? That tells you that all the golfers in the States currently are being trained to hit the ball 9 miles, non-negotiable. So the long drive swing, if it isn't there already, I might argue that it is. I was always told that guy can't break 80, so don't do that. There's gonna be guys with that kind of action who may have to tone it down, who may not. It depends on what they do with the golf courses and the golf ball. But what's not changing is how they are trained over here. Everyone, any successful teacher is teaching the long drive swing to the next generation of players. Or my little story is at the Memorial, Best Milkshakes on Tour. I was sitting with Kevin Streelman, one of my best friends in the world, Jordan Spieth, Jason Day, Colin Swatton. We're all at the table. I'm not saying anything. I'm just taking it all. I have my milkshake. Okay. They're watching NCAAs, and Kevin stands up and he kind of proclaims to the table, "Well, boys, make your money now because the number 5 guy at Illinois just flew at 3:30." And he's the number 5 guy. More than likely, you may never hear that guy's name, right? So that's the thing. That's what's out there. The number 5 guy at Illinois is carrying at 3:30. Make your money now, boys. That's how they're being trained. That's what they're being taught. No one's looking at, maybe with a wedge, but yeah.
They actually, I mean, with every golfer, whether there's a strength and a weakness to the game, isn't there? You know what I mean? So if you get a guy who's got big, strong grip, long backswing, carries it 330, but he might have a massive disadvantage around the green because the way he does things, he's not got the same degree of control, right? Is there a point here where you could get somebody to hit it that far off a tee, right? But could they actually play with it? Would they be able to finesse it in from 30 yards over the track, drop it and land it? Because if you were taking a long driver who's got to pound it 400 yards, you're setting it up for that shot, aren't you? That shot that goes X distance within whatever is like a runway, and they get 10 goes at it. But to play this game with that motion, even if you look at Sadlowski, who's tried, hasn't he? I don't know where he is within the world.
I watched him play at Whisper Rock. I ain't playing him. He's really good. And I know what you're saying. So if the total focus is on one club, does it not have effects on the other? Here's another question I always get and this again still applies to the body track at seminars and so on, speaking engagements. Do these players show a uniform trace for all clubs in the bag? And the answer is no. So to go with where you're going, so Nicholas said he has 14 golf clubs, but one golf, and it's really 13. We got to eliminate the putter here, right? But he's got 13 golf clubs, and it's only one swing, one basic swing. He said that in Golf My Way. That is, with all due respect to him, I'm sure the nuts and bolts are similar. But with that said, these athletes are not being trained in that fashion. In other words, they are you need only look at the 3D alignments at impact to understand that hitting a driver is not like hitting a wedge. So, no, a lot of these guys are showing multiple pressure traces throughout the bag, and it could be environmental too. So it's endless because obviously you can measure on uneven lies, golf's not. But if they were on a flat lie and they went through all their entire bag, no, they would not show uniformity in their trace. And if they do, it will show you why they're good at one part of their bag and why they suck at another part. In other words, I was told as a kid, well, Davis Love is like the best driver with a persimmon wood, but he's not that great with a wedge. But then I was told, Justin Leonard, he's really good with the wedge. And I go, okay, why? And I'd ask the golf pro. I was really freaking annoying. I'd ask the golf pro, why? Why is he great with a wedge? What's the difference? And he goes, well, he has to be. And I'm like, what do you mean he has to be? We all have to be, right? We're trying to shoot the lowest score. We all have to be. So it's so cool to measure that and to see what they're doing and how it's different. And if you do have a guy that's a great ball striker, great throughout the bag, there won't be uniformity. It'll just be those certain things that I mentioned that I mentioned a little bit at the beginning that are similar. But if you strive for this idea of consistency, you might see that in the floor some uniformity, which will help you with a part of your bag, but will actually not help you with another. I used to tell Kevin all the time, Kevin's one of the best drivers of the golf ball on the planet, hands down. When I coached him at the Masters, he led the field in total driving, strokes gained driving, which is impossible at the Masters when you've got Dustin Johnson and Rory McIlroy in the damn field. Basically what that meant is he never missed a fairway out there, right? He led the field that week in strokes gained driving. He's the ultimate driving machine, but something
People are returning. Hopefully, hopefully Jake will be back. He's probably just gone to comb his hair. Oh, he's back. He's back. Kevin Streelman plays on the PGA Tour. Oh my God. I just said, I bet he's gone to comb his hair.
You don't have to comb hair like this. You just have to step out in the Windy City and it does it for you. I don't know what's the last thing that you heard, but basically, you want to be overly simplistic with something that's multivariable. If they're really good at a part of their bag, don't change it.
But what's the commonality then? What's the commonality in those long drivers? And what changes? If you were going to set up a game now, you're going to set up a player to play on the PGA Tour. You're going to give them almost a different trace with the driver to the iron. What's going to change and why?
So it's the amount of time, not necessarily the quantity thereof, and I'll explain that. So long drivers are very quick to lead and trail side, okay? Extremely quick. So remember how you said almost after P2, that's when they should start pushing down? And I'm not going to disagree with that, because if I was teaching someone to hit the ball the furthest, there is no question I would be looking there. I've got this little balance, this little teeter-totter thing, and I really think you have to be able to demonstrate all traces, even if that's not the one I would play with. And so on this teeter-totter, I go, would you like to see what the long drive guys are doing? I just stand on it and I go, deet, 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 right? So basically this, and what we call that is the Z trace. If I'm teaching someone to hit up at the ball the most, I'm going to probably max out their verticals, okay? So what is required to do that? Well, first off, probably then they'll move it forward, then they'll move it back at around P3 or 3.5, right? And then from 4, they'll be on their lead side right as they transition, which as they get to humerus parallel on the downswing right there. So 5, when they get to 5, that is when I'd like to see max lateral achieved, because after that, I want them in pure rotary vertical motion through the golf ball. So that little V chart, if for those body track users out there, that V chart that you have, you want to peak that like the damn Richter scale. Like I want that thing out. If that's all I'm doing, I want that thing out. And what you'll notice is, generally speaking, the longest players will, the mass, and this is important to note, because if there's amateurs on here, they're all going to hang back at it, right? Awful, right? And they already do that anyways. But and then they're going to blame me, you know. So the important thing here is, as the club is swinging forward, the mass is also at all points moving in that direction. The pressure may not be, though. So the pressure marries the mass in the first part to P2. After that, it can be doing very different things. As the club's still traveling back, it can go in the lead side. As it transitions, it's in the lead side, and it can be backing up. They use this to max out pressure on the lead side sooner to allow them to jump more through impact. So we call that going dark. In other words, as soon as that's probably a bad term, okay? Hey, Mike, you ever gone dark? No, I don't know. I don't know what that means. But anyways, when they're off the mat, you can't measure them anymore, right? And Lexi Thompson, stuff like that. So, and I'm not inclined to change a player that does that, by the way, because it is all about the delivery, is it not? So a lot of these people.
That's what Scott said the other day.
Yeah.
So well, how they can control the speed and absorb the speed of the head through the ball. And how different wrist conditions, none were wrong, but they're obviously different patterns for different things. And you imagine here, you could match that pattern up with that trace.
Yeah, so the people with the highest verticals move the lead wrist into extension faster. And the people with the most rotational forces do it slower. So if you're just talking pure angle of attack, to get the handle to raise the maximum through impact, then you need to max out their verticals. And to max out their verticals, my suggestion would be, so people are really into quantifying, well, he or she jumped up with 2 points their unit of mass, right, through impact. So they're two times their body weight through impact. They love to say that. Well, the interesting thing is, it's cool, but at the same time, it's more the ramping up time to do it as opposed to how much you're actually using. Because some of that has to do with your stature as a person, and some of that has to do with the surface in which you lift off from, okay? So people are in love with that number, and obviously 2 is better than 1.75 and all of this stuff. I'm more interested in then the amount of time that it took them to ramp up, not only how long, but the when it occurred, because that's how they'll achieve better results. And whatever they do it with is what they do it with. I've had big, I have a web.com player who is 6'5", and I definitely want him in a bar fight. He ultimately has almost 0 verticals through impact, okay? He's almost like, he's a little over 1 through impact. He has some, but he's just a lateral player, right? And he hits the ball a ton. And then I've got, people that are smaller. Here's something that's interesting, because I know you had Sasho on. Sasho told me this a long time ago.
Sasho, next week. Got times and dates wrong. So we'll do it next week. But I'll ask him anyway.
Make sure you ask Sasho about him jumping over a car when he was drunk in college, because I think it's on YouTube. Make sure you ask him about that. So when he starts talking so wonderfully and so fluently about verticals, make sure you say, hey, didn't you like chug a beer and jump over a car? He's got the video. It's hysterical. Anyways, something Sasho told me, and what a brilliant guy, and what a giving guy too. And by the way, secretly, good player. I know I hear all the time that these researchers can't play. Sasho can play a little bit, okay? He's a low single-digit handicap. I know that. I've seen it. So Sasho told me, he goes, the interesting thing is everyone would say Justin Thomas is maxing out verticals through impact, right?
Yeah. Please
Please forgive the phone. Allegedly, I should be working. But anyways, so they see Justin Thomas off the floor, and they think, well, he has maxed out verticals. But interestingly enough, measured, he has very similar verticals to McIlroy. And McIlroy's not off the ground. He's not on his tippy toes and so on and so forth. And it all lies in the shallow squat or the loading of the ground. So Rory lowers more after transition, lowers more, which thus he can push up from the ground more, doesn't have to leave it to achieve the same amount of vertical force through impact. But I guess because of his squat, if you told him, Rory, I want the spikes out of the floor when you hit it, then he would actually have more. So it's just interesting. These are the decisions you have to make as a coach of what, to your point, what is the need of this player, right? So my point with the guy on the web.com who is hitting his 6-iron 235, my job is for him to find his ball, right?
Yeah.
It's that simple.
But it's interesting because, there is this time sometimes where people are trying to squat and jump who actually aren't squat and jumpers. The rotation. Yeah. Scott said it the other night. We were talking about Mackenzie against some others, and that they'd stripped out all the vertical jumping component from his training program. Because if he starts using verticals, he can't control ball flight.
Right.
When his ball stays lower and rotates, so his training program's completely about rotation because that's what enables him to keep control of the ball. And I think, there is this mindset that actually the more we jump, the further it's going to go.
Not necessarily, right? We have three basic motions, right? We have a lateral component, a rotational component, and a vertical component. And I wouldn't discount any of those. And somebody's going to be better at one or two than they are at three. And that really is how they go about doing it. So obviously a lot of single axis guys are really believers in the centerness of the rotation of the pelvis and the backswing, right? And then some guys go, nah, that's shit. You should have an early COM, and then you should, leaning tower or Pisa forward, late recenter, all that kind of stuff. I guess I was always the guy that would tell them that they're both right. It's amazing that I'm still married because I'm a contrarian. When I hear that that's the way to do it, I have to point out everybody else that didn't do it that way, right? And then I would argue the other point, right? So if they said it was that way, so those are the decisions that you have to make. You have three basic movements. If they're a better player, they're already showing signs of being great at one or two. I guess if you're creating a golfer in a lab and you wanted them to be the most consistent, to hit the ball the furthest, I guess you would try to equally recruit from those three motions, right? The lateral, the rotational, and the vertical, or what people call the kinetic chain. But I haven't seen too many of those people. That's the only problem. So optimal is not always personal. In other words, maybe we learned too much too soon on technology where we just asked the guy that invented it, like, all right, well, what's good, right? And the answer is it's all good. It just depends on the individual. What do they need help with, right? So, if I was totally getting someone from a ground force reaction standpoint to hit the ball the furthest, there would be a lateral component. And remember, we're talking driver, obviously, so the ball's teed up. So things aren't necessarily coming at a price that they would be if the ball was on the ground.
Do you think there's a difference in trace between players who play on different tours? Have you measured many on the European tour against the guys who play in America?
Yes. So I don't know how many names I've dropped, but I'm going to drop another one. Every time I do, the number of people goes up. So
get all these waves.
Yeah, and like 7 of them are like, my wife, her sisters, and well, actually, she's already unfollowed me and blocked me after that last comment. So Nick Faldo. I spent a few days with Nick and Scott Hall. Again, this is that consulting work. I'm not saying I coached Nick Faldo. I came in as an expert on the body track. So I was with him and his coach, Scott Hall, who's a great young coach. And I noticed right away, and I had seen this before with European Tour players. Again, I was traveling with this to events where they had more pressure. I also saw it with players out of Texas. So Faldo had about 71 to 73% of pressure on his lead side at setup. So these places where I believe that's an environmental educator. In other words, these places where the conditions aren't always great. And I'm talking, what's great? What's that mean? Golf's a game played outside, where it's windy and you have to flight the ball and keep it down, and that's more of a paramount than necessarily. I mean, Rory McIlroy has the most American game I've ever seen in my life. I don't think he's Irish. Okay, so he might be lying there. I don't know. So Faldo and all the guys that I've measured on the European Tour that come from these regions always seem to have more pressure. They all have some. They have more pressure on the lead side, okay? They also tend to move the pressure there and trap it. They don't tend to back up through anything, through their driver or whatever. So if they're not backing up the pressure, they're not raising the handle, adjusting the attack angle, and launching it super high with no spin because it didn't serve them in the environment in which they grew up with. So yes, that's a great question. European Tour pros, by and large, now a lot of the European Tour is not played in Europe all of a sudden, but European Tour pros, by and large, are showing some differences based on their region and how they grew up and what would have benefited them in the British Amateur. You know that I've spent time with Scott Gregory, right? His trace is different. His trace was showing that. His trace about trapping it forward. I jokingly made a video a couple months ago where he was hitting not only stingers, everybody's seen a stinger, and I recommend anybody watch this. He was hitting stingers with a shallow faced fairway wood off the highest tee imaginable. And I'm just like, every junior in this country would idiot mark the shit out of that club. Right? And he is hitting it quail high all the way out there. But that's easy for him because of where he grew up. You know, with what's going on in Chicago right now, this is a wonderful day over in the UK. So it's windy, it's cold, but it's not raining too much. So, you know, tee it up. So it's so interesting of where we learn the game and the effects that has on us. And you have to watch that DNA because Scott's the British Amateur champ. I don't think changing that and saying, no, bro, to play at the highest level, you got to do this. You know, you're messing with a player's DNA. You got to be careful with that.
Well, you'd be very easy to send him down the wrong path.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know
and his coach out there, Simon, has done a phenomenal job with them. I mean, obviously, if I can help a little bit by my knowledge of tech and communicate, that's the other thing. So when you're brought in as a consultant, everyone needs to row in the same direction. Otherwise, they should throw your ass overboard. Okay? So I'm always, I never tell these coaches what to say. I tell them what I see or what I found. And whatever they want to do with that, they can do with it. And if they'd like some advice, well, have you seen players have that? What did you do in the past? You know, then we can go that route too. I like to present the information. It's kind of like those long drive guys that content that we're going to have rolling out maybe in the spring or summer. It was so great they're like, what do you think? And I'm sitting there going, about what? About what I do. I don't know. The golf ball likes it. It still hasn't landed yet. You know, I mean, what do you want to know? Right?
But it's, you know, you could sit here and talk foot pressure all night. You know what I mean? And
yeah.
There is so much variability to it, you know, and different styles and different movements produce different things, you know. But the reality of, you know, the whole thing is, you just want to give the player the right information to do the job. You know what I mean?
Right.
I always have the logic with my son that, you know, you don't know whether they're going to be good or not. You couldn't say any kid is going to go and play on the PGA Tour or play for Man United or whatever, right? The reality of the situation is, unless you give them the tools to do the job, they'll never do it. You know,
100%.
If you can start to give them the correct information that is accurate, you know, with a way of how to diagnose or how to then utilize it to make them better, well, you know, you're not guessing anymore. You're not throwing their career down the wrong path. You know, you are actually doing them the right service instead of that'll do. You know,
right.
When I see, you know, when I've talked to different players and you find 10 players doing the same drill, you know, there's sometimes the alarm bells go off going, hang on a minute, how can you all have the same problem? You know what I mean? God, that to me is, you know, it doesn't work.
I compare it to the E! Network. Do you guys have that over there? Where they show live from the red carpet. And then you got like Ryan Gosling and you got like Julia Roberts coming down, and they always put a mic. They're like, who are you wearing? Who are you wearing? So when I see a lot of tour guys all doing the same drill, who all have the same teacher, that's who they're wearing. And it can't be good for all of them. I'm sorry. It just can't be. And then about your kid being a good player. My kid is, I have 3 boys. My oldest is an excellent player at Nintendo Switch. Like, he's unbelievable. But golf, probably not.
Eh?
Yeah.
That's the fun. And you look like, we could sit here all night, but
Yeah.
I'll wrap this up in a minute. But you look like you have so much fun on your junior academy, right? Literally.
Thank you.
You look like you create obstacle courses. You have them hitting over things, under things, through things.
Yeah.
Press ups, but you literally have them doing a lot.
Yeah.
And it's called the US team.
Yeah, so I am one of the, and you are this way, we are of a similar DNA. I am one of those rare people, and they exist, and they are in every walk of life, where I am doing exactly what I want to be doing. Exactly. At no point, I do not sit in front of you as a failed player. I grew up with Kevin Streelman. I could not frickin' beat that kid, okay? Put that out of the way right away. I loved golf.
Did you ever beat him?
I wish I was at home. I'd show you the Woodridge Junior Open trophy. and I always say, I'm like, do you know what you know what this is? And he goes, no. And I'm like, it's the Woodridge Junior Open trophy. I go, you know what's special about that? I go, we played in that event. And he goes, yeah, I don't remember it. It can't be true. So, I'm one of those rare individuals, and they are in every walk of life, and I hope all of you find these people in every walk of life that is doing exactly what they want to be doing. I am not a failed player. I am a failed social worker. That is my educational background. It was in clinical psychology as it applies to child and adolescence. I wrote my dissertation on college on autism and golf's effects with social interaction. I actually wanted to be a child psychologist. I worked with mentally ill children and realized I wasn't tough enough. And what I was doing with these children was always bringing them to golf. So it was a better people through golf. I promise you, I never once thought I was going to work with tour players. I only wanted to work with juniors because they're inherently more coachable. Adults don't fucking listen, okay? If I tell a kid to stand on one foot and hold your breath and you'll be on tour, he'll do it. He shouldn't, but he'll do it. So when you're watching me post all my juniors, the thing that I tell them is a lot of them are teenagers, right? So this is a program for elite level training. We say we want them for 10 years. I want them from 8 to 18, right? So I want them for 10 years. And basically, this is a program for prospective tournament players, right? And what I tell these kids is like, and it's funny, but this is the junior golfer and me speaking. So I tell them, so they're like 13 years old, right? 14 years old. And I go, I start liking you guys when everybody else stops, right? I'm like, you're a nightmare to your parents. And that was what it was for me. When I was a junior, the guys that I looked up to were golf professionals. And the guys that I played with golf professionals, I didn't think about the PGA Tour. I just thought about being a good player. I guess that meant a scratch player. That was the only people I thought was good. And then I just wanted to be like these guys because these were all the would-be fathers in my life. So my junior program, my USA Junior thing, is I don't care if anyone doesn't believe me. I am the most proud of this than anything else. And in that program, we are trying to train, and I would challenge anybody who trains juniors. Take a long, hard look in the mirror and prepare those kids for what you yourself struggled with. In other words, and there's some funny stuff on there. So, in other words, I said this in a room at the PGA show. I said, raise your hand if anybody, while teeing off next to a road, had somebody honk the horn and yell, 4 in your backswing. The entire room raised their hand. And I said, well, that sucked, right? And I go, but if the entire room had the exact same experience, is that not golf? So what we do is we distract the kids constantly. Earl Woods dropping clubs. You've seen me. I've had kids like hitting cymbals. I had one kid pull up YouTube and have nails against a chalkboard. I always put them on camera. When they play in the simulator in the winter, I have them pick up their bags, put the incline on the treadmill all the way up, and walk with their bags on there, because that's what's required to play golf, right? Their junior golfers are going to have to carry their bags. So if you took a long, hard look at yourself, because I am a product of block practice, and I am not going to disparage block practice, because it got me to a level, but it got me to a level that I wasn't going to exceed. If you can take and by the way, I automatically assume if they're in my program, they're already going to block practice. So that's the one form of practice not allowed at practice, because they better be hitting 200-300 golf balls a day. Otherwise, what the hell are we doing here, right? So try to prepare your juniors for things that you openly admit you didn't handle well yourself. I was on the local media. I saw a red light go on a camera, and I was like Cousin Eddie in Christmas Vacation. I pissed myself and forgot my name. Like, I had to double clutch. I'm like, all right, it's like, let's start over here. It's just a 4-footer for par. And so that's what I try to do. I actually try to scare the hell out of them a little bit. I try to keep it fun. We're big into skill acquisition without them knowing, and so on and so forth. So yeah, and I can't take all the credit. A lot of that goes to, again, Dr. Jeremy, who gives all these kids individualized physical screenings. They have all their own individualized workout programs that they are to do at home. And then we do a lot of team, I guess we'll call it team building stuff. My background came from team sports anyways. I didn't play golf until I was 14. So it's just wired in there that way. And I think what we're stealing from, and it is stealing, learning is proper learning is stealing. I think we are stealing from the Olympic model. In other words, the most decorated Olympian that we have in the States is Michael Phelps. So he obviously was on relay teams, and obviously he was also very decorated as an individual. The interesting thing is he was never trained as an individual. He was always in the pool with other swimmers. So this is my belief. In this country, we have the model backwards. We tell people, get into a group lesson to get good enough to get into private lesson. I actually think that's total malarkey. I think you should take private lessons to obtain a competent skill set to allow yourself to succeed, to excel in competitive group environments. And if we did it that way, we would build players. We wouldn't build. It's so hard because here's the thing. If they took private lessons from you, I guarantee their golf gets better. And I guarantee their golf swing gets better. The only problem here is the testing. In other words, you gave them this great swing, and you turned them from a slicer into a drawer, but at no point did we test them in the environment, which means everybody plays in tournaments. Everybody. Some people play in their work golf outing against people that they see on a daily basis, and they don't want to embarrass themselves. So I'm sorry, that ingrained pattern has not been tested in the field, right? Yeah. So what did they do? I'm giving you and me and anybody all the credit in the world. You did improve their golf swing, but their return on investment in their mind thinks that lessons didn't work because they hit it good on the range, and then they went out there and threw up all over themselves. And thus, private instruction failed them. And it didn't. Their golf swing got better. It just wasn't tested in the environment. So if we gave people a competent skill set and then allowed them to achieve in environments, which, by the way, means throwing up all over yourself. right? From there, we'll build golfers, and in their own minds, their return on investment was very high. That's why we have the fallout rate that we do in the game.
Do you know what, Jake?
Did we have a moment?
I have to say, right, I think you're absolutely barking. I mean, on the money, because I think I see the same thing. You know what I mean? I think I see the same thing. And when you're right. The reality of the situation is, how do you deal with everything else that's going to happen in golf? You know what I mean? Unless you've experienced it.
The physics of your golf swing must allow for some consistency in the ability to control distance and shape. There is no question. It is a piece of the success pie, but it is not the whole damn pie, right? Because I was playing against kids that had caddy swings. That's what we used to call it. Like Matthew Wolf's got a caddy swing, right? And I ain't paying it. I ain't playing him for paychecks, right?
Have you measured that?
No, but I know George, and I love what George is doing. George is the Johnny Knoxville. This goes back to John Jacobs and Bob Toski. This goes back to when great teachers had great personalities. And then all of a sudden, we all had the proverbial stick up our ass. And then we had to almost talk over people and use very big words and all these kind of things. And then the previous generation hated us for it. And we're just saying, well, we're using accurate terminology and stuff like that. George is a throwback. He never has to worry about using terms incorrectly because he just makes up his own damn terms, right? Scooby-Doo or and Squamadoo and all that kind of stuff. And I love what George is doing. George has some tour players, but I love what he's doing with juniors. All of them show up in a hoodie and a backwards hat, right? And he's on the Golf Channel in sweatpants, right? Did you see that? That was freaking brilliant, right? So I have long since believed. Now this is because I'm a public links kid growing up. I did not belong to a private club. No one in my family played golf. I have long since harbored the belief that the stick needs to be pulled out of golf's ass. In other words, when Ricky Fowler has a backwards hat and does an interview, awesome, cool. Because my son thinks he's cooler than I am, which he is. So.
And here you go, though, before we go. So
yeah.
What is the George Gankers pattern then as a pressure trace?
Oh, come on.
Does it really sit back that long or not? Is what he trains actually what happens or not? And I've had conversations with George over this, and the guy, he's a really intelligent guy. I really liked him, right? And he comes across completely differently on different social medias to what he's like to actually talk to. I have great respect for the guy. He's very, very switched on. But does it actually happen? Or do I have to ask him?
Well, if you do, I want to know the answer. So I'm going to say this quite politically, okay? I have never measured a PGA Tour player, an elite level player, who didn't have the pelvis translate forward in the downswing. I've never measured it. And if you want to know a range, I hate averages, by the way. Okay. And there's a lot of guys that speak to average. No one fits into an average, but everyone fit. Here's the dumbest yet most brilliant comment of all time. Everyone fits in a range if you make the range big enough. Okay. So I have never seen my personal experience or watching other teachers of note measure and looking at their data. I have never seen a player not move from P5 to 8 at least 4 inches. And I've seen as much as 7 with the pelvis. Okay, so I've also never seen a player obviously not get pressure forward sooner than the worst players. We need to, in golf instruction, generally speaking, we have to speak to general. In other words, we should talk. So when I have seen plenty, here's another way of saying it. I have seen plenty of people that shoot 100 that don't move the pelvis forward on the downswing. I've seen plenty, but I've never measured an elite level player that didn't at least move it about 4 inches from 5 to 8.
Center of pelvis.
Center of pelvis, yes. Yeah. So with that said, that could be a wonderful feel for the overly lateral player. Could be a wonderful feel. And you would see the pressure trace change on the ground. But I might argue that you also could keep them. Their idea of shallowing is losing their inclination to the ground. You could keep them in their inclination longer as a way also of getting the handle and everything working more, we'll say, left through impact. Whereas not blaming the lateral component. And when I have a team sports background, here's another thing. I don't think I've ever told this to anybody, Mike. I put 3D suits on members of the Arizona Diamondbacks, which is a baseball team, the St. Louis Cardinals, and so on. So when you see, and I've had hockey players on body tracks where you put the fake ice on top of them. I have never seen, now hockey players are much more rotary than golfers, generally speaking, but I've never seen the lateral component completely dismissed in athletic motion. So it can be a wonderful feeling. It certainly could be a solution. But that one is probably, unfortunately, what is feel is not necessarily real, which I told you I don't like that either. But, you know.
Jay, it's been a ball. What started off as a quick chat nearly went on for 2 hours.
You know, I'm over before this starts. By the way, you dragged some shit out, and I'm not happy about it. Okay?
Well, I just think the respect that you didn't put your hat on and you took your hat off to me is just enough.
So this is how I look at home, right? And by the so the two things people know me for, like golf clothes and my hair, which is the funniest thing, is I'm never in golf clothes and I'm always wearing a hat. So, and always backwards usually, like Ken Griffey Jr. style. So,
mate, you've been absolute legend, as I knew you would be.
Thanks, man.
It's been great. I appreciate your time. Thanks for taking the time out to talk to me. You know.
Thanks, buddy. I appreciate it. I've been a huge. You're an awesome host. I've been a huge fan of yours. You and I connected well before I ever spoke in London. When I first got on social media, and you were one of the first guys to reach out to me, and we talked about the whole SUDI thing and all that kind of stuff. And we've been great friends ever since. And I'm always watching what you're doing, and always hitting like and everything like that. So I just have the greatest respect for. I have the greatest respect for the people that are doing exactly what they want to be doing, and that would be you, my brother. So,
thank you.
All right. See you guys.
Thank you.
All right.
Bye.
See ya.